was just after 6 in the morning when I stepped out the front door of my isolated cabin in the Adirondack Mountains, hoping to clear the last bits of sleep from my head with a breath of crisp forest air, thick with the scent of pine needles and damp earth. I'm Aidan Brody, once a journalist, now a novice writer trying to rediscover meaning in the wilderness, and I was still half asleep, barefoot in my scuffed boots, wrapped in a worn flannel shirt, thinking mostly about coffee. But the moment I stepped outside, I stopped cold, every nerve in my body going rigid, because just a few steps away stood a massive black bear. It wasn't moving. It wasn't growling. It didn't posture or pace or charge. It simply stood, there on the porch, silent, breathing heavily, its fur matted and wet in places like it had just dragged itself from a river or survived something savage. The air around it felt thick and still, as though time had paused. What rooted me in place weren't its claws or size. It was the eyes. Dark, wide, and startlingly human in their expression, they were glistening, no, actually weeping, with real tears trailing down its muzzle like a cracked faucet. I'd never seen anything like it in my life, and then I noticed what it was carrying. Dangling from the bear's mouth was a tiny cub, limp, lifeless, like a stuffed toy dropped by a distracted child. Its head lolled to the side, legs hanging. Loose, no sign of breath or struggle. And just like that, I understood this wasn't just a bear. This was a mother, and her baby was dying. My first instinct, of course, was to slam the door and grab the old rifle that hung on my kitchen wall. But something about her stopped me. There was no threat in her posture, only a quiet, devastating grief that pinned me in place. My heart pounded so hard I could barely think, but I didn't run. She took a few slow steps forward, careful and deliberate, and then, with impossible tenderness, she laid the cub down on my porch, backed away, and sat on her haunches. She stared at me with an unwavering gaze, as if asking something I couldn't yet understand. Every story I'd ever heard about bears, every survival instinct told me to retreat. But I didn't. I crouched slowly in front of the cub, my knees shaking. It couldn't have been more than the size of a cocker spaniel, its ribs too visible, blood crusted around one ear. I was almost certain it was already gone, until I saw it. The faintest movement. A breath. It was so small I could have missed it. A shallow, stuttering rise of the chest. I looked up at the mother again. She hadn't moved, her eyes locked, onto mine, filled with a strange, silent plea. And before I knew what I was doing, the words tumbled out. I'll try to help him. She didn't flinch. She just stayed there, still as a stone, like she understood. Gently I wrapped the tiny body in my flannel shirt, and moving with slow care, stepped back into the house. I expected a roar, a charge, but nothing. She just watched. Inside, I laid the cub gently on the couch and scrambled to find anything that could help. Towels, water bottles, a heating pad. I moved by instinct, not expertise. Through the window, I could still see her, unmoving, a dark sentinel at the edge of my porch. The cub felt cold, alarmingly cold, but not gone. I knelt beside him, pressing 2 fingers to his ribs, praying for a pulse. Nothing. I leaned in closer, and then finally I felt it again. The tiniest breath, warm against my cheek. You're still here, I whispered. You're still fighting. I bundled him tighter in my shirt and ran to the back room, dragging out an old space heater and cranking it to full blast. I built a nest of blankets, towels, anything soft, and nestled him in. His breathing was shallow. One back leg looked stiff, unmoving, possibly broken. Blood had dried around his ear. This wasn't just dehydration or cold. He'd been hurt. Badly. I heard scratching outside. She was still. There, the mother bear, like a monument of grief and faith waiting. I grabbed my phone and dialed the only person I could think of. Rachel Kowalski, a vet who usually dealt with cows and goats. Rachel, it's Aidan. I have a bear cub. He's badly hurt. The mother brought him here. She's waiting outside. There was a silence, then Rachel's voice came through, skeptical. Aidan, Have you been drinking? No, listen, I swear I'm dead serious. I need to know how to help him. Another pause, then a sigh. Okay, first, warm him up. Stop any bleeding if you can. No solids, give him fluids. Honey and warm water, a few drops at a time. I'll call Ginny. She's worked with wildlife. We'll be there as fast as we can. I went to the kitchen, found a dusty bottle of raw honey, mixed it with warm water, and used a turkey baster to feed the cub drop by drop. No reaction at first, but then the slightest flick of his tongue. My heart leapt. That's it, I whispered. Stay with me, little guy. I sat with him for over an hour, whispering, humming, occasionally swearing under my breath when frustration bubbled over. Outside, the mother never moved. I cracked the door open once, just a little, and she raised her head, met my eyes, then lowered it again. That single motion, quiet, full of trust, still haunts me. How could a wild creature place her child? In human hands? By noon, the cub stirred, just a faint twitch of his paw like he was testing if life still fit. I laughed, a breathless, relieved laugh, and didn't even notice the tears until they hit my shirt. You're not leaving us today, I whispered, my voice shaking. Not today, not on my watch. Even though I tried to stay calm, deep down I was quietly panicking, fully aware that I was nothing more than a writer with some towels and an old heater, trying to save a wild animal I barely understood. By early afternoon, my living room looked like a disaster zone disguised as an animal clinic. Every surface covered in blankets, stacks of towels everywhere, the heater humming. On high, and the little bear cub curled up like a swaddled infant, one tiny paw peeking out from the layers. But when I checked that paw again, I noticed fresh blood. The wound had reopened. Up close, I saw the edges were puffy and red and shaped like teeth marks. An infection had set in, the kind that could kill him quicker than cold or fatigue. Grabbed a bottle of hydrogen peroxide, the stuff I kept around for cuts and scrapes, soaked a clean cloth, and gently pressed it against the wound. The cub jerked and let out the faintest whimper, and weirdly I felt relieved. Pain meant he could still feel something, that his body was still trying to hold on. From outside I heard a low growl, quiet but unmistakable. I turned to the window and saw the mother bear hadn't budged. She was still there, a solid, unmoving shape against the forest, but her gaze tracked everything happening inside. I cracked the door open and whispered, "He's still here, barely, but he's fighting." She didn't respond, didn't make a sound, just exhaled long and low like she understood. I went back inside and lowered myself to the floor, next to the cub. I offered him more honey water, and this time he moved his tongue a bit more deliberately, licking the sweetness, a tiny, fragile step forward. My phone rang and I scrambled to answer. It was Rachel. "Ginny thinks you've lost your mind," she said dryly, "but she's on her way. She'll be there soon with the meds." "Thank God," I said. "He's bleeding again. Looks like a bite, and he's burning up. Keep him warm. Keep the fluids coming. And whatever you do, don't open that door wide. That mother bear's patient, but she's still a wild animal," Rachel warned. I knew she was right. It was pure luck or something stranger that had kept that massive creature from smashing her way in. Another hour passed, then another. The cub twitched more often, shifting slightly, and I whispered to him, "Take it easy, buddy, not too fast." Then came a sound, a low, broken noise, like a toy winding back to life. Not quite a growl, not quite a moan. I checked the wound. Again, the bleeding had slowed. The swelling looked a little less angry. It wasn't great, but it wasn't hopeless. Outside, I saw the first signs of real anxiety from the mother bear. She paced a few slow steps back and forth before settling, back into her spot, as if wrestling with her own instincts. I lit the wood stove, knowing full well the house would get too hot for me, but this wasn't about me. As the light began to dim and the shadows stretched longer, a quiet miracle happened. The cub opened one eye. Just one. He looked straight. Me. And in that gaze I saw no fear, no confusion, just quiet recognition, like he knew me. "You're not alone anymore," I whispered, and I meant it. He blinked slowly, then drifted back to sleep. But for the first time I believed, really believed, he might make it. By the time Rachel and Ginny finally arrived, the sun was dipping behind the trees. The mother bear had vanished into the tree line but hadn't gone far, just watching from the shadows. "Holy hell, you weren't kidding," Rachel muttered when she saw the cub. Ginny, all business, knelt down immediately and began her exam. "This is a bite," she said after a few moments, "from an adult male. They kill cubs sometimes. It triggers the mother to go into heat. Lucky little guy. His mom must have fought like hell to save him. And bringing him to you? That's remarkable. She must have been watching you." That thought sent a chill through me, that she'd been out there in the woods studying me before deciding to trust me with her only child. Ginny and Rachel stayed for hours. They cleaned the wound again, gave him antibiotics, stabilized his vitals. When they finally packed up, the cub was breathing easier, his paw wrapped tightly in clean gauze. "We're leaving some meds and instructions," Ginny said. "But once he's stronger, he has to go back. He can't grow up here." I nodded, but inside I was already in too deep. I could feel it. Over the next 2 weeks, Baxter, that's what I'd started calling him, even though I knew better, bounced back quicker than I thought possible. His wounds closed, his energy returned, and he started exploring my cabin with awkward curiosity. I knew I shouldn't name him, shouldn't let him sleep on the rug or play with an old tennis ball. But I did anyway. And every morning, like clockwork, the mother bear would reappear at the edge of the woods, sometimes closer, sometimes farther, always silent, always watching. I started leaving food out. She didn't always take it like she wanted to, keep her dignity. Then one afternoon, Baxter was bouncing around the cabin, clumsy and fearless, and there was a knock at the door. It was Deputy Louise Gentry. "Aiden, I heard you've got a cub inside and a full-grown bear posted up on your land," she said flatly, standing exactly where the mother bear had once placed her cub. I didn't lie. I told her everything. She listened without saying a word, arms crossed. When I finished, she shook her head. "You're lucky no one's been hurt. But this is a problem. Wildlife Services knows. They're coming in 3 days. And they're not just taking the cub, they might relocate the mother too. I can stall them a little, but you need to act." That night, sleep never came. I sat in the dim light watching Baxter curled in his blanket nest, warm and safe and completely out of place. I knew it was wrong to keep him. He wasn't mine. He belonged to the trees, the rivers, the wind, not a log cabin and a lonely writer. But the idea of letting him go felt like ripping a part of my soul clean off. Still, by morning, I knew what I had to do. I packed a large storage bin with his blankets, tucked him inside gently, added his tennis ball, a small pouch of food. Then I loaded him into my truck and drove into the heart of the forest, toward a spot I hoped was close to his mother's den. The trails were rough and narrow. I drove slowly, scanning the woods for any signs of bear tracks or markings, until I reached a small clearing wrapped in a circle of tall, dark spruces. I parked the truck and stepped out. When I opened the bin, Baxter blinked against the sudden light, nose twitching as the familiar scent of pine and moss filled the air. "This is home, buddy," I said softly, a lump tightening in my throat. Stepped back, giving him room. He shuffled out slowly, paws uncertain, eyes wide. He looked at me, confused, maybe even betrayed, and then paused as if asking why we had come here, why everything was changing again. Then we both heard it, the sharp crack of branches. At the tree line, the mother bear stood still, watching. She looked cautious but not aggressive. Her eyes met mine, and once again, there was that flicker, something deeper than instinct, something almost knowing. I took another slow step back, silently offering her what was never mine to keep. Baxter turned his head toward her, then back to me, caught in a moment between two worlds, between comfort and calling, between my warm hands and the pull of the wild. The mother bear made a low, soft sound, half growl, half coax, and he began to move. A few steps, then a stop. Another. My heart twisted as the space between them closed, each step a stitch in a torn seam being mended by love. And then, just when they were nearly nose to nose, Baxter turned around and hurried back, pressing himself against my legs with surprising force, like a child giving one last hug, or maybe offering thanks in the only way he knew how. I knelt down, let my hand move through his fur one final time, and whispered words he couldn't understand but might have felt anyway. Go on, little one, be who you're meant to be. With a gentle push, I sent him back. This time, he didn't look back. He bounded to her, and she sniffed him all over, like counting the pieces of her heart. And then something happened I wasn't ready for. She raised her head and looked at me again, just for a second. And she gave a small, deliberate nod. Then, turned, and together, they disappeared into the shadows of the trees. I stood there long after they'd gone, suspended in a strange stillness, filled with grief and peace in equal measure. Like closing the last page of a story I hadn't meant to start, but one that had changed me entirely. Back home, the silence hit me like a wave. Too much space, too much quiet. I boxed up the blankets, the chewed-up ball, the bowls, everything that hinted he had ever been there, and carried it up to the attic. I couldn't throw them out, but I couldn't keep them close either. Weeks passed. I fell back into old rhythms, writing again, walking the woods, finding comfort in solitude. But in the quiet hours of dusk, I'd sometimes find myself on the porch with tea in hand, eyes drifting to the tree line, wondering if he was out there somewhere. Then one morning in autumn, I stepped outside and stopped in my tracks. On the porch sat a neat pile of wild berries, perfect, ripe, unmistakably placed. No one in sight. But I knew. I smiled at the woods, where a shadow flickered briefly. Maybe wind, maybe memory, or maybe the two bears, now whole again, reminding me they hadn't forgotten. Since then, each fall brings a new offering. Berries, pine cones, even once a small gleaming stone. As if saying, we're still here. We remember, and it's enough. Enough to remind me that the moments that shape us often come quietly, without warning, that trust and love can bridge even the wildest distances. Now, as I write my story, I think often of that mother who placed her faith in me, and the cub who taught me that love doesn't always mean holding on. Sometimes it means knowing how and when to let go. In a world that draws hard lines between wild and tame, they showed me that compassion can blur those borders, and that understanding can grow in the most unlikely places. Visitors sometimes notice the small carved bear on my shelf. I tell them it's just something from the Adirondacks. But really, it's a marker from a chapter in my life I never expected, when my house became a sanctuary, and I became, for a short while, the protector of a life that wasn't mine to keep, but mine to guide back home.